Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the second day of racing at the Cyclocross World Championships in Hulst. It's a podcast episode with some technical difficulties. For me, on location, it was really hard to find three things. One, a place where it was dry so I could record. Two, a place without too much background noise. And see, a place with some light. So I'm moving around and there were some technical difficulties with the audio, which means, my audio quality will switch between a variety of different sources throughout the episode. It's our first year of doing video. It's the first year of this much on-the-ground reporting, which has been a learning curve, trial and error, and today was definitely an error, which was a bad day for it to happen. But it happens, just like some riders didn't have the day they hoped for at the World Championships. But with me here to discuss all of the action is Issam.
Thank you for having me. I think when I saw the rain predictions, I backed out of my initial statement. But no, it was the circumstances were there. But I didn't even check the weather because, in all honesty, the weather this whole week was hard to predict in a sense, and there was not really a clear prediction, and every day it was a little different. And that is, that's the great thing about a World Championship, that there are just so many things that are, you normally can really depend on, even the weather forecast, and even that is at times very tricky to follow, and that makes the World Championships even more exciting and so special, because it's just that one day, that one race that really matters.
Let's start with yesterday's podcast episode. Like I said, it's a bit of trial and error to record these episodes, and in that we forgot a couple of things. First of all, we didn't really discuss as much the big topic in the French media, the move between Manon Bakker and Amandine Foucounet, where Bakker moved over aggressively and kind of forced Foucounet to need to brake check herself. Then, secondly, what we didn't mention was the DNF of Stefano Viezzi, who had his tube come off his rim. He needed to run to the pits, left his bike at the beginning, and then got disqualified. And thirdly, what we also forgot to mention, staying at the Italian side, was Sara Casasola. She DNF'd the race. She didn't feel fit from her crash in Hoogerheide and had pain in her leg, which made her withdraw from the race. Then I made a promise to ask more about the state of the Czechs. Kristina Zemanova, there is interest in her from teams, but at this point it is loose interest. Multiple bigger teams have inquired about her, but at this moment there is nothing that's really materialized yet, and they're not sure if it's going to happen because they've been in this situation before, and then they only got one offer, which was not really a serious one. Bukowska, there has been some interest in her as well, but the people in the Czech Federation think she's going to stay in the Czech Republic for a few more years because she's not really ready, mature enough to make that step to other teams. Then let's go to the men elite racing today, because that's what the people are listening this podcast for, right? They want to know what happened, and I assume most people watched the race and they know what happened, and it's what we predicted that would happen and what was written in the stars. Mathieu van der Poel, he took the bull by the horns early in the race and rode away. The first lap was Thibaut Grosso nearly doing a lead out in an out-of-character aggressive moment, but then Mathieu van der Poel shot away and flew to the victory in the second lap. His 8th world title, undisputed goat of cyclocross. What a phenomenal ride by him. Nobody was remotely close to him today, and he shows why he's the best, why he has that many rainbow jerseys in his closet. For second place, there was a more interesting battle. After Del Grosso was very, very viciously pacing in the first lap, he kind of needed to settle in a rhythm, and he came in a group together with Thibaut Nys. Those two were together for most of the race. I felt that Thibaut Nys was the strongest for most of the race, but Del Grosso managed to hang in there. He managed with a couple of tricks out of the hat, be it up the steep run-up, be it in one technical section. He always had something to pull when he was under pressure, and therefore Nys could never really drop him. And as the rain intensity increased later on in the race, the tables turned, and it became Del Grosso in the final lap who was the one who eventually would finish second. It got a bit slipperier. There were some talks about the tire profiles. Nys was on fewer thread than Del Grosso and Van der Poel. They had more knobs on their tires, and that could have made the difference. But what is true is that Nys made too many mistakes in that final lap, still considering that. He didn't make it up the steep chute, then missed his pedal, nearly went onto his top tube, later made another mistake, and from there it was Del Grosso who went on to take second place ahead of Thibaut Nys. But before we talk about that battle, Issam, Mathieu van der Poel, it is what we expected, but it's still good to just notice how special this is.
Yeah. See. I think that was it was what we somewhat expected, I think, and that is the status that he has currently as a rider. He is just the very best. There's not much you can do about it, and before the race even starts that it will be a very exciting race and a very unfortunate race for himself if he was not to win. He proved that very, very clearly. He let Del Grosso lead him out, and then when he felt that it was the right moment, he made the separation and was in control of the entirety of the race. Never was in any trouble. Went over the course quite well. There were, of course, those videos of him making mistakes in the reckoning and stuff, and crashing here, crashing there, having a knee fall here, but it was all small. And he was, I guess, testing the limits, testing the course, and that's what you have to do. And then he comes up here and he is always within margin. It's clear, to be honest, that we are experiencing the greatest cyclocross rider that there ever has been on this planet. It's going to be very hard for the next generations to beat what he has done and to reach that level. It should not be an objective to try and reach that when you start your career. I think that this is incredible, something we're probably not going to see for a while, but it was from inside a very, very good race, very strong race, and I think that, as I said, this was what we expected, and he delivered.
It certainly shouldn't be a goal of any rider to start their career thinking, hey, I need to become the next Mathieu van der Poel. That bar is too high to reach. But it can always happen because in sports, quite often, it's with these records, you think, oh, this is impossible to beat. But then quite quickly, it does become beatable because in Formula One, Michael Schumacher, how many Formula One world titles? And just quite shortly after, Lewis Hamilton also reaches the same amount of world titles. So that is really the thing with records. They are there to be broken, and today was an example of that. Van der Poel doing something no other male cyclist has ever done before, showing that he is the greatest cyclocross rider there has been, and he did so in style, deserved after this winter, nothing really else to say there. But then moving to the battle for second place between Nys and Del Grosso, I did feel that for most of the race, Thibaut Nys had the upper hand. He made a strong impression. Del Grosso set out super fast. It really reminded me like he was doing a lead out almost like in Hogerheide. There it was Van der Haar in that role. He sent a missile, then Van der Poel attacked. Van Aert was with him. Van der Haar needed to recover a bit, but then still repacked himself and came in that battle for the third place against Iserbyt. Van der Haar didn't win that battle. Del Grosso did win the battle today. But I did feel Nys should have won that battle. This World Championship has brought us quite some surprises this weekend, but there were also a number of things that couldn't be solved for riders. Things they've been dealing with all season became a fatal flaw here, and for Nys that was a technical mistake. I would by no means go as far as this season is disappointing for Nys. The expectations are always high. You're looking at, hey, who is the next rider up? Who is the rider that can potentially beat Van der Poel? And for that, you don't look long. You come to Del Grosso and Nys has been in that position a few years longer than Del Grosso. So it makes sense that expectations are high, and sure, this season had a number of races where it could have been better for Nys, but it still wasn't a bad season. I do think that things like today, he needs to improve on that. I already mentioned like there was a tire choice thing and the tire pressure thing that he couldn't really change or didn't feel like he could change anymore with the time you lost in the pits, but it was still, like that mistake there on that run up, it's easy to make one. It's easy to make a mistake anywhere with this rain coming down on a course like this. But it's still something that he needs to work on and he needs to get rid of so he can become an even better cyclocross rider.
Especially that first part where you were saying that, I think I had that feeling as well. I think most viewers had that feeling as well, where you could see that Nys maybe had the edge if it's, if we talk about power and condition and the shape he was in, it just felt that he had the edge over Del Grosso, but you cannot win that battle against Del Grosso if, to be honest, when we came into the later phase of the race, especially when Nys allowed Del Grosso to be in the lead, he kind of picked up a thing or two there and he learned from that, but it was still, you could still see that Del Grosso had the edge on those technical, the dives also, the uphills. Del Grosso just, if you're able to, on a course, to pick up a second here or half a second, and there a second, and there 2 seconds, you really need to be a lot stronger to beat Del Grosso. And we have seen that this season so far that, Nice is maybe stronger, but it's not that strong. And today it was painfully displayed for Thibaut Nys, and Del Grosso made thankful use of that advantage that he had, and he knew it because he at times he gave. I don't know if it's about it was all luxury in a sense, but he gave him maybe like 2-3 seconds, but he just knew, okay, when that hill comes up and where you can make it, or you're just about to make it, I'll know that I can make up at least a second or maybe even 2 seconds. And it was painfully displayed for Nys. And that was one of those things that we were, thinking about going into this race, that we knew that Nys is going to have issues and he needs to, tidy up his game. I didn't know if it was going to be this painful, in a sense that it was, really, that it was going to play such a role, but in a sense it is going to play a role when you have a battle that is so tight, when you're so close to each other. It's going to be the details that are going to matter, and these type of obstacles, in a sense, on the course, if you're not able to negotiate as fast or as close as possible to what Del Grosso was doing, and Del Grosso was really phenomenal on some of those sections. It was at times it looked even better than how Van der Poel was doing it. I think that it was, then obviously that's going to play a major role. And on the last lap, he was not able to get there, and then it is what it is, and you have to. The battle is gone for Nys, and Del Grosso was victorious and was the better man for second.
I agree with you, Issam. I've now also found a new point on the course for those watching on video. The breaking down of the LED arch was getting a bit too loud, but what I wanted to say was that I agree with your take about Del Grosso being stronger technically, and again, Nys is a really talented rider. He had a good season, I think, but he should have normally finished second here today. He's on this course, I think, stronger on the power sections today, which is again what we've said repeatedly this season, right? Nys physically might have a slight edge over Thibaut Del Grosso. That much is true. But Thibaut Del Grosso is more versatile. He's able to stay calmer, stay smoother, and that, I think, really played a role here today. The second half of the race of Del Grosso was impressive. The way he was riding up those big run-ups here, that was really impressive. Repeatedly, the one by the windmill, he was just slightly better. 10 meters, 15 meters, he closed it time after time again. And then it becomes really difficult for a rider like Nys to kind of overcome that, right? Because he's stronger physically, he puts him under pressure. Del Grosso always has a trick up his sleeve. Hey, if I do this, then I'm going to come back. Hey, if I do that, then I'm also going to come back. So could Nys have done anything differently today? Throughout the race, I would say no. In the final lap, he should have avoided those mistakes, but tactically, I don't really have anything to say about Nys or Del Grosso for that matter. It was, I think, a nice and fair battle, and mistakes are as much a part of cyclocross, even more a part of cyclocross than physical strength.
Yeah, and they had a good understanding during the race, because behind them it was not like they were not racing at all. There was quite a group behind them, and that was maybe when we were discussing the preview of this weekend, especially with the men elites, we were, at least for me, it was a question of what is going to happen behind Van der Poel. And I think that due to that start of Del Grosso and the way he was able to basically thin out that entire field, and they were the only three left, Van der Poel, Del Grosso and Nys, I think that helped in the race dynamic for those two. And that's why they, in a sense, didn't really end up in that group. I think they had the strength to break away from that group, but potentially they wouldn't have raced it the way they did it now, in a sense. I don't know, but it's hard to judge because you don't really know how that scenario would have played out. We have seen it in previous races that it could play out that way, because you try to hold back a little bit, you try to save something up, and I think they still saved something up. But it was really a high level that they displayed, both Del Grosso and Nys, and they had a very good understanding. They were relaying in a sense when one of the two was not really feeling it to lead. On the start-finish, they took over time. So I think it was a very fair battle, and that was also nice to see. You don't want to see controversy for second and third, rival nations in a sense. So it's great that played out the way it did. Fairly and with a lot of respect, and that is how the sport should be.
If we're talking about that, it was interesting here. They had that Dutch and Belgian grandstand, but it wasn't really a rivaling thing or anything going on there. It was sport as sport should be. Yesterday we critiqued the broadcast a little bit, but I will say that today it looked much better. The balance between drone shots and the rest, and let's also face that, right? Like those drone shots here were really phenomenal. There were some really good points where they really added value to the broadcast, and overall, like, it was a nice event and it was broadcasted nicely. So it was today much better also with the racing action. The live timing came on a bit more often and they showed the battle for fourth a number of times. They found a good way to also get those graphics that they trailed last week at the World Cup out and indicate some time differences. So that was a positive for me, and that battle for fourth was also a positive. Maybe the outcome not what personally I would have hoped for, but it was nice to see that battle. It went back and forth. We had a number of riders making a move. I think the main one that stood out was in the middle of the race, Felipe Orts breaking away for a lap or two. He broke clear, but got caught again. And then we had a group with Filippo Fontana delivering his best ride of the season today at the World Championships. He's a rider who we've talked about a lot here. He's a mountain bike rider who's done really well in the World Cup. He's been on podiums there, and this season he decided, hey, this cyclocross project, I used to do it quite a bit, I'm going to take it more serious now. And it paid off, right? Like, he was bunny hopping the barriers quite well. Technically in those downhills, he held his own. Okay, you can say that's mountain biking, but even in these technical sections, these chutes, these little climbs, it all added up for him. And that was, I thought, really great to see. It's a shame that he stopped pedaling too early on the finish line, and that meant that then Joris Nieuwenhuis was able to overtake him. But nonetheless, it was a good day out by him. He lost it, and to be honest, I didn't really expect Nieuwenhuis to be the one that got it. He kind of came out of nowhere in a way in the last lap, because he had his kind of, at this point, since that injury that he's been dealing with to his knee, the traditional fallback in the middle of the race, but he really repacked himself with a flyer of a final lap, sprinting to the line, which is rewarded as always. I mean, rookie error by Filippo Fontana. He should not have allowed that to happen, but nonetheless it did. And also in that mix was Gerben Kuipers, who rode a really strong race. But Nieuwenhuis and Fontana, I think, both can be really happy. Nieuwenhuis a bit of a sweet ending to a season that has been difficult due to that injury, and Fontana really proving to himself, like, hey, if I take this discipline serious, look what I can do in one season.
Yeah, you know, I think, of course, there's a difference between fourth and fifth, but you can still say it was a top five. So I think that in that sense, there's not a crazy amount lost there in that result and in that sprint. But of course, you wanna, if you can finish a place higher, you really want to do that. So it was a shame to see in a sense, but I think also Fontana can be extremely proud with that result and maximized, apart from that sprint, a great effort. And I think that it was, if you would look at that effort at the beginning of the season, you would be like, that's top five. If you would have told me that, I would be like, crazy. Yeah, or you're maybe Pontoni or something, and you're trying to hype up the Italians in a sense. But here he is, and I think that this is a testimony as well to some of the riders that might have built out of their cyclocross campaign in a sense, that are from the non-Dutch Belgium countries in a sense. They're not a non-Dutch Belgium rider. I think that those riders have to look at a result like this and be like, be hopeful, because there is room there in that top 10. And I think that Fontana proved it as well. Solid outing. I have to say, you complimented the broadcast, but I would have loved to see a little bit more of the riders behind, because that was kind of the racing that we have seen. And at some point I thought, Orts had a moment there where he broke away. I thought that's a good move, but he was not able to hold on to that. And he got some footage, so I was fine with the footage that I got. But if I want to be critical, I thought that it would be nice. It would have been nice if we saw a little bit more of that battle, because I think those riders deserve that as well. And I think that Gerben Kuipers was definitely one of those riders that deserves some praise as well. Where he came from this season, I feel that this is a very solid result, and I hope that he can continue on with that trajectory in a sense and get the positives out of this and build up towards next season. maybe even get a result or two after the World Championships, because there are still races. And yeah, I think that Nieuwenhuis was surprising. We know that he can do something at a championship, but it was a weird build-up in a sense, because he kind of came up from a situation where we were thinking maybe his season is even over, it's gonna be compromised in a sense. But it seemed all right, but it was hard to judge. And there he was, fighting for fourth. And I think that, considering that we have Del Grosso and Nijs and Van der Poel there ahead, I think that is almost the best you can do in a way.
Maybe just briefly to finish the part on the broadcast, I still think it was much better. I get your point, but we both come from Formula One, where we can be watching a wheel-to-wheel battle for 16th, because that's what we want to see as racers. Whereas in sports like cyclocross, there's more narrative of watching the technique and watching the flow of the front rider, and there's a lot of people who want to see Van der Poel. So in that sense, I thought today was a good balance between that. To talk a bit about the riders, because you mentioned, hey, this result of Fontana is really a way for mountain bikers to look at, maybe I should do cyclocross, maybe I should keep believing in myself, and then look what's possible. We discussed this in the same context with Van Turini a few years ago, right? Like, he got World Championships top 10s, and we were like, look, this is what you can do if you take this sport serious as a road rider and don't completely give up on it through the under 23 years and above. But in that sense, the result of Gerben Kuipers is also a very impressive one, because if you look 3 years ago, he was also sixth at the World Championships in Hogerheide. So on face value, you might think, there's not that much that changed. But in those 3 years, a lot has happened, right? Like, he broke through a phenomenal story in which he was working in a factory and then needed to kind of keep training and do that after his work. That all improved him, and he signed with Wanty, with the Jean Ligois team, but it didn't bring him what he hoped, and slowly but surely he's found his way back. And in recent weeks he did that. He found his way further to the front of the races, and that helped him again today. He finished sixth, the same place as he was a few years ago, but there was such a dip, and this is a great story for many riders. There are plenty of people that don't shine as under 23s and juniors. It's easy for us to look, hey, Thibaut Nijs, you've become world champion juniors under 23, now on the podium here. He's always been a talent, right? But there's also riders like Gerben Kuipers who find their way to the front later. He races first world championships as a last year under 23. I mean, maybe the same will go for Kai de Bruycker. He only raced his first world championships last year, immediately finished on the podium. Now he missed it. He was out with a food poisoning infection from the hotel, but like, he can also overcome that in the elite categories, right? So I think those are all very interesting storylines, and that Gerben Kuipers in that way can be a dynamic for him to kind of inspire those riders, the ones who don't necessarily excel yet in those other categories. If we look at the entire top 10, Van der Poel, Del Grosso, Nijs, Nieuwenhuis, Fontana, Kuipers, 7th for Orts, 8th for Aerts, 9th for Michels, and 10th for Van Toerenhout, who couldn't turn it around after 2 illnesses. I think the one rider here still to discuss is Felipe Orts, 7th place. I believe this is his best finish at a World Championship. Would you say this is also his best season, or is that a short view, just looking at the World Championships and neglecting that the last few weeks have been really good, but that in between it was a little bit iffy, where in past seasons he was able to perform throughout that Christmas period?
That's a difficult question, because on face value you would probably say this season was better. Maybe the best thing to say about his season was that he arguably reached his highest form, his best peak this season in his career, I think. It felt at least like he was, especially that week, from Benidorm onwards, it was a level that I was like, thank you for showing this, because we had the sense when we saw him preseason and how he started this season, the early season, he was good. And I thought, if he can build up from this is gonna be even better. And I felt kind of a bit let down by that, because I really thought there was really more in it. And I would almost say the moment that you expected it the least, there it was. There was Felipe Orts, and he did it at this, Benidorm, the arguably for him maybe even higher higher rated than the World Championships in a sense. For sure, the World Championships is going to be special, and he would have liked to finish maybe a little bit higher even. Although this result was also quite good, I felt like he maybe took a little bit too much initiative from the footage that we saw. He maybe was too eager, and I can feel that in a, I understand it because they were literally fighting for P4. That's a top 5. That's a very solid result, and you are in that group, and maybe he just felt a bit too much urgency to do a little too much, and I think that attack eventually costed him. If he was able to save that up for the last lap, I think that he would have been able to battle it out there with Nieuwhuis and Fontana, and that would have been, fighting for top 5. And what a result that would have been. That would have been even more special. But I think that if you look at that and you look at this P7, I think that is still a very solid result. You look at that podium in Benidorm, which was super special, and you look at his performance in Maasmechelen, was also very impressive in my opinion. I think that he reached a level that he has not reached before, and it's basically, for me at least, I really hope that he can do that more also next season, and he can build up from that. A top 10 at a World Championship is always a solid result, especially for a rider like Orts. So I think that he can still look back at a successful World Championships, although he also must feel some, a feeling of there was maybe more possible. I think that must also be a feeling maybe that he maybe, he felt after the race, that he maybe will feel for the coming days, and that's maybe a good feeling, because that, you need to find some motivation, I guess, to work even harder in the off season. And I think that, motivation is not going to be lacking there with Orts, and hopefully he will come back stronger. He's a great rider, and it's great to have another flag than, other than the Dutch and Belgium in a sense, and he is representing Spain very, very well.
It was a good day for Spain, but we'll come back to more on that in a little bit when we go over the other races. But I think it was indeed a level that we haven't seen Ort reach yet. It's just a shame, like the level he reached at the beginning of the season was really high, and then it kind of flattened a bit. And I hope next year, because Ort is also getting a bit older, like it's been 9 years since he raced to the podium at the World Championships and BLS, like it's time for him as well to, it needs to be now in his career, is my point. It's not that he has an infinite number of years left to improve, and in that sense it's great. And sure, maybe the Christmas period didn't go as hoped, but he got a World Cup podium this year still. He got a World Championship top 10, and those are like marks that you can check off in your career. And of course, he already checked off the box of the World Cup podium last year, but still, you could see again today, the Orts is just such a phenomenal rider. There's few riders with better technical ability than him. The way that he kind of curves his body through the corners is something that barely anybody does. Like in the simple corners here, he is so much faster than many other riders. That's really, really impressive, and today's result was a nice reflection of that. If we move on then to the under 23 women's race, we had there quickly a trident of favorites breaking away. It was Fleur Moors, the Belgian, who's had good starts this season, within her wheel Leonie Bentveld and Celia Gerry. Victoria Gladonova, she was held up a little bit and needed to chase, but joined the leading group, which gave us 4 leaders. It was immediately Gladonova who took the initiative and set the pressure. Moors dropped quite quickly, but Gerry, she didn't necessarily have her best day, and what really necked her was a crash just after the VIP tent, after the flyover, one of the trickier corners all weekend. Several riders putting feet down there. She crashed, was out of contention, that left Gladonova and Bentveld. Gladonova kept mounting that pressure. She went on, push. She broke clear, had a 6-second gap, but it wasn't enough, because where Gladonova was clearly the stronger rider, Bentveld was technically so much better. In the section around the windmill after the first big up, you could just see Bentveld through the corners quicker, managing to regain a bit of time. Gladonova was able to ride the run-ups a bit further than Bentveld, but in the end, especially in the final lap when Bentveld finally got back, you could again see that the technical ability of Bentveld was so much better. Bentveld the downhill, the first big drop, the line she took there in the final lap is one of the best I've seen all weekend. The speed she carried down there, absolutely unreal. Gladanova then in the end under pressure makes a mistake in front of the VIP tent. Game over. Bentveld wins the title. I have mixed feelings here. Let me first say that all the comments of Mette Penning aside that we've joked about this season, in a way it's also a prophecy that's fulfilled for Bentveld, right? Like, she's been second behind Backstedt so many times, and now Backstedt isn't there and she's able to get that place. That's a great result for her, and based on this season you cannot say it's undeserved, right? Like, she started this season really well, really elevating her level, making a step that was necessary for her to improve and show herself like, hey, when I'm going to go to the elite category next year, I'm not still a back-end top 10 rider, I can challenge for top 5 and podiums, which she has been able to do repeatedly this season. It flattened off a bit, but then she's back here at the most important day, and that raises a bit to me the point here, Issam. In past few years we've grown accompanied to the fact that it's especially the non-Dutch Belgian riders who perform well at the championships really peaking for it, the French way. But this year I feel like the World Championships in general have been a return to normal in a way, like what we've seen before so far. It's the non-Dutch Belgian riders that perform well throughout the season, that have the results in the youth categories. Come the World Championships, it's the Dutch and the Belgians who get it right, and that I think was really the case today with Bentveld. She nailed it on the most important day. She was strong physically. Gladanova arguably stronger, but that doesn't matter because Bentveld had the skills today, and that rightfully gave her the title, especially with that light rain all day. That really helped Bentveld make the difference today.
I think I agree with what you said. It's for sure, like, look, this was definitely a tricky category to both predict, and also in terms of who was going to be on that podium. In a sense, we kind of knew who were going to be the stronger riders, but a clear winner was hard to find in a sense, because with Géry you had someone that was not performing at her best in those last weekends in a sense, and then you're, especially the last weekend really, and then you're kind of put in doubt. And today it was clear that she didn't have her best day, and Gladanova was very strong, I think, and was arguably stronger as Bentveld. Bentveld had more punch and power behind it, and for sure negotiated those downhills as well, and technically was having more than an edge over Gladanova, and that won her the race. Because I think that if Gladanova was technically, and I'm not talking about technically as handling the bike, but just like that cross know-how, knowing how to cut the corners in a sense, that downhill, taking just a little bit more risks, knowing how to stay in your run on that downhill. Those are just things you saw with Gladanova. There was not a lot of confidence. There was confidence. I mean, I will go in that downhill way slower and I might crash, but compared to Bentveld, the difference was there quite visible. And also on that move on the last lap, that's a class move in a sense. The way she waited as well before she launched herself there on that downhill, I think that was a really, really good move. And it was a very deserved championship. But if I look at the context of it, that is why I kind of disagree with you, is, Bentveld is a rider that, in my opinion, should already be thinking about, should already had that championship in a sense, or moved to the elite. She's really on the edge of that bubble in a sense. While if you look behind, that is kind of the riders of the hope, the riders that are the real talents in a sense that still have a lot to develop. While Bentveld is, I think, at the end of that development curve. There is still some, she's still a talent. There is still room for improvement. There is still room where she can get better and better. But I think we just kind of looked at two different type of riders. If you compare Bentveld to who she was with on the podium with the Gladanova and Géry, and also the riders behind, I just had a different vibe in a sense on how you look at Bentveld and how you look at the other riders. And it was a shame that Gladanova was not able to, I think that if you look at the form and how she went over the course, it really was that kind of, made her life a little harder, and she was not able to get the victory. But I think that if you look at the talents, there is not much Dutch talent in the under 23 category behind Bentveld. So that is also maybe something that you have to look at. And it was a tricky category. I said that at least this was really a category where I was looking at that it was a race of the underdogs, where it was hard to put in place how it is really going to play out. It's hard to follow as well which rider is going to enter this weekend, regardless of the circumstances, and is going to do very well here. I think that the riders themselves, we were kind of right about, but how that would eventually play out, that was of course a different story.
Look, I don't disagree with you that the age is always a factor in the under 23, and Gladonova, Géry, second years versus fourth year Bentveld, that is a difference. And I don't disagree with you that if you have to ask me who is a bigger talent, Gladonova or Bentveld, I say Gladonova, also because of her performances on the road. Géry, same. But still, like Bentveld, she didn't have that title yet. She's been up against Zoe Backstedt. She's been up against Zemanova, Mari Schreiber, like real talents. Like it's been packed there. The field is young in the elite category as well. There's a lot of first, second year elites that are really breaking ways there. That's why for the last few years we saw some riders that were not necessarily in the top 10 of the World Cups really break into that top 10 at the World Championships because the under 23 category was so stacked. Yes, I don't necessarily think Bentveld has the engine of the other riders we mentioned, but it's not an undeserved title because of that. And I think in that way it was a fulfilling prophecy, more so that it's her final year and she got it right on the day in her home country. And what I meant with the return to normality is something that we'll talk about more in the junior category and our final wrap up. It's just the sense that the last few years we had in these categories different nations and nationalities winning the world title, and this year we see also in the junior category Delano Heren win. We see Aaron Dox win the men under 23 category. The Belgians and the Dutch that haven't necessarily shown it at the season but put it together on the day that it matters the most. Again, this is something that I keep saying. This is a one-day race. It's not like football where you need to perform over the entire season to become champion of your country or champion of the world. No, you very much need to perform on one day, and that's what Bentveld did today. And she did it very well. Géry, I don't think, had it the best, and with that I've praised the French a lot, but I also have to somewhat question their overall performances this World Championship. Like, was everyone at the best of their ability today? Bruyère Joumard, I think he was not necessarily the strongest I've seen him this season. Yesterday, Lise Revol, like, it's not that they're horrible. The French, okay, their world title winning streak ends, but they didn't do horrible, right? Like, they still get 2 silvers, a bronze, a number of top 5s, but it still just looks a little bit off compared to the previous year, and that's what I just noticed about Géry. First, she had that crash. Okay, that's immediately like a game over for the title in such a situation, but physically she was also not as good. In the last lap she even got challenged by Fleur Morse, who managed to come back, and she pushed away again to take that third place, but it was not the same Géry I saw, for instance, in Benidorm, or that we saw at the Koppenberg, or that we saw in the first half of the race in Denmark.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That was kind of the feeling that I had as well with the French Federation overall. If you look at their results, it's not a huge disappointment. Maybe it feels like that for them, but it definitely was underwhelming in a sense. And they, if you looked at the French Federation and you looked at the categories, you would imagine that they would walk away at least with one title. Underwhelming is the right word. I don't need to, it is what it is, and they cannot change it now. But they can definitely be critical and look at what went wrong. If there is something that went wrong that they can change, and try to change it and try to make it better, because they have the riders to get those titles. It didn't click, and that's the World Championship. It's tricky. You need to make sure that you are, you need to understand, and especially junior categories, there are some riders that have only one goal in their mind. They don't even care. They want to do somewhat well on those World Cups because they want to have those points, they want to have those results, they want to start, more up front. But that is it. When you are at the World Championships, that is what matters. When you win that title, that is what you can put on your palmares in a sense, and that is what you're going to take with you. And second and third is also nice for the medals, And that's it. No one is gonna talk about the World Cup winner in a sense 5 years ago in the men junior category, the women junior category. That's not gonna be talked about. You're going to talk about it if you want it, but that's it. It's so the world title, especially for those categories, is so important. And maybe you're right. Maybe both the Dutch and the Belgians, looked at those titles and were like, that is our goal with Bentveld, with Dox, here as well. They knew like this is gonna be the moment. This is where we have to peak, and this is where we have to beat the others to it, and get that title. And if you're going to jump into conclusions, they were successful.
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it, and you can say maybe the course played in, the last few years it was a more power heavy course, technical skills especially today played more of a role, and then the Dutch and Belgians come to the forefront more, and perhaps they did look at the last few World Championships and did look, hey, what are the French and the Italians doing, and we should also be doing this in our youth category. So look, I agree with you, right? Like Géry, I just went over it, she has a lot of potential, and there's many years to come for her, so I don't doubt that at some point she will land this world title. This year was a year of learning, it was a year with ups and downs. Maybe next year she takes a bigger break after the road season, and that will help her in a different way. So that much for Célia Géry, who is still a phenomenal rider. 4th place went to Fleur Moors, 5th place Amandine Muller, 6th Vida Lopez de Saint-Roman, Alyssa Sarkisov, Lydia Cusack 7 and 8, Lison Desprez 9, and Elisa Ferry in 10th. I think before I'm going to move back to the gas station, because it's so dark that you at this point can't see me even with this flashlight shining in my face. I thought it was a good ride by Fleur Moors. She was 4th, kind of the maximum today, didn't have the legs to do much more. 5th place for Amandine Muller, also a good ride, but what really stood out was 3 Americans in the top 10. All of them first or second year under 23s. They all did very well, and I think that was kind of what stood out to me, because you said, the Dutch, they don't really have the depth of field. I can agree with that, but then you have to look at it, which countries do. The French have 3 in the top 10, and the Americans.
Yeah, this was a great outing. We discussed it in the preview, and we were right about the riders in a sense, but it was a question of how the racing would go, how the start would be, and I think they were on it. They had the right mindset. They were right in the race, because you see sometimes a rider, we have seen it this weekend, where riders start and they are not really in the race, and they have to race themselves in it, and that is effort that will cost you in the end. But you also need the legs in a sense, and I think that this is a very encouraging sign for America overall. If you look at it, this is what you want to have, and this is definitely the depth of field where you can work with. So I think it was great to see. I think that Lopez de Saint-Roman was a very good effort. I think I was surprised by her first lap and the start, and how she was able to get through that, because that at times can be tricky for her, but she managed it very well. Cusack looked maybe in the beginning as the strongest American, but maybe went a little too hard, and that costed her in the end in terms of position. But I think nevertheless still a very good result. And also, if you look at her season, a very solid season as well. And Sarkisov was also able to get by and be up there. So I think that was also a very very strong result, as there's some shouting.
I think you're partially correct here about Lopez de Saint-Roman. Her initial getaway was really, really bad. She missed her pedal twice here, and from there on it was a recovery race for her, and she did that very well. She moved through the field quite quickly, found her groove and found her group, and then lost out in the sprint for 5th place to Amandine Muller. The others, Cusack, she crashed a bit towards the end of the race, but overall it's a good day for the Americans. All of them have things they can work on, be it their start, be it their crashing, be it their technique, whatsoever, but they did quite well today. They secured some good results here, and with that they can be happy. Everyone at this age still has stuff to improve, right? So That's, I think, a given. And if we then move to the final race that we cover here, the men's junior race, that one was another upset, Issam. It was Filippo Grigolini. He had it in his hands. He took off in the second lap of the race. He opened a 15-second gap, and Delano Here, he struggled. It was raining. Then he went into the pit, got some more mud tires for him, and he stormed to the front. But still, in the final lap, Grigolini had a 12-second lead. He had it in his hand. He crashed on the second drop, nearly launched his bike into the lake. He still had a 5-second lead, right? Like, he dropped the ball, he still managed to recover it, he still had a possibility to win, but then the pressure got him and he stacked the mistakes, right? So that first mistake, he loses his mental cool, he kind of starts feeling, oh shit, Delano Here, he's right behind me, I need to hurry, I need to boogie, I need to... And then in the corner at the VIP tent, he goes down again and everything falls away for him. And Delano Here, who hasn't won a World Cup this season, he wins. And I said it this preview, I said it after Benidorm, besides the 5 guys, 2 Italians, Pezzo Rosla, who didn't have a good day at all, Grigolini, Søren Bruyère-Jumar, who also didn't have a good day, then Noval Suarez and Gilles Lejeune, I couldn't really see anybody take the win, but I was wrong. Delano Here, he did it. I mean, if anyone, he was the next guy that we discussed in the preview, but this was way beyond expectations, right? Like, the way that he rode, like, cut through the field is impressive, and he's a first-year junior, so we'll see the rainbow jersey on display next year.
Incredible race from his side, but also an incredible race overall. What a race to start the day with, in a sense. And did we know how Grigolini lost like 8-9 seconds on that penultimate lap as well? But I haven't seen a crash there or anything. Like, was that pure pace, or was there a mistake?
No, Here was flying. He was flying.
Well, he was. Yeah, but if you look at the lap, for me at least, it felt like Grigolini was maybe slowing down as well. Then, if there was no mistake and that was like 9 seconds, just Here was flying for sure. But it felt that maybe Grigolini was also, at that time, also slowing down just that tiny bit, maybe. But I think that Here can, you put him under pressure. Grigolini makes those mistakes. Pontoni must have said some, Mamma Mia and some Italian cuss words. And because I would say when they went into that last lap, I was like, there is a small chance, but this is Grigolini's world title. This is not something that you're going to let slip out of your hands in a sense. And it's almost like, he was in such in a position we haven't seen someone in this weekend that lost out. He was in my opinion, he was in a comfortable position. That is what you want to have. He had like a 12-second lead or something. That is enough. You had to just keep your head cool and that's it. But there was a Here flying, and his race overall, it was in the beginning it didn't really look like that he was going to be the one that was going to try and challenge Grigolini. And looking back, you might be asking if Grigolini was not a little too eager in opening that gap and how he paced himself in that race. But then you look at the mistakes, and the mistakes are also mistakes that you should just not be making at all, in all circumstances. The pressure got to him, I think. I think that is maybe, he was hearing that gap was closing in a sense, and then you're going in a downhill that you did 4 times already, and then you're going to do things that you should not be doing. You're going to think twice. You're going to be like, this is gonna be a slap in the face for him as a rider, and you have to try and work it out. That's what you have to do. But man, that was quite the race to start the day with, and I think that was hard to beat. I don't think it was beaten of the drama, the real drama that we saw in that final lap. That is, I think we can say that is the drama that I haven't seen. That level of drama I haven't seen this weekend. It was really crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, it was a dramatic finish, and the pressure got to Grigolini. But look, I'll give him a breather. It's a junior men's category. These are 17-year-old riders, like maybe 18. So you need to give them a bit of space and become better. And in a way, look, it's a shame the Italian streak comes to an end, and the French, like, okay, that narrative that we had for a few years has been turned around now, but you just have to give it like to Hera to perform like this on the day, right? Like he had a couple of good results this season. He wasn't as consistent, but he pulled one out of the hat today, and that's the state of championships. And this season we got quite some surprises. Last year we said, well, the World Championships weren't too surprising. It was all pretty predictable, and this year that was definitely not. We got a few major upsets, Hera being one of them. So I want to credit his win where credit is due. It was really good ride by him today. That confidence that he had and instilled as he came out on the pitch on the mud tire, the mud profile, it was really, really, really impressive. So that much for Hera, that much for Grigolini. Lejeune came in for third in the end. I thought for a little while that Noval Suarez potentially had it in him to close that gap, but Noval Suarez, we said it, his start was an issue. Today again, he came from 22nd position, made his way to the front, but by then it was too little, too late. He didn't have it in his legs. This is most likely his very last cyclocross race that we have seen. He's gone to Ineos. He's a road guy. And it's a shame. Like, it would have been nice to see him on the podium, but Lejeune also deserves it for that matter, right? Like, Lejeune today, flawless ride, didn't really see any mistakes. And that's one of the first times this season that he delivers a ride like that. He doesn't then have the legs after illness. He was disappointed afterwards a little bit, which I totally understand, right? Like, you've been sick, you deliver a good ride here, finish third. Perhaps it helped that because of the illness, he started without pressure. We've said it before. I think Lejeune deals a lot with pressure, not just from the Belgian pressure cooker, also from just self-obtained pressure. He seems to be very hard on himself. He also, I think, deals with some pressure from expectations from having a fan club and all that matter. But he delivered a good ride today. Okay, third is maybe not what he had hoped for, but it was a good ride. And I think with that, those were the main takeaways from the front of the race. And yeah, the rider's missing. Petzo Rosela, not a good day. He physically didn't look good. It was his teammate Telolio who made a lot of the crashes. Petzo was like kind of locked in more towards the end. He also made some technical errors, but it was overall not the day for him. Joumar tried to be there in the first lap, but also ran out of legs quite quickly. And again, like, that happens, right? Like, especially at such an age, it's hard to perform on the day. And all that in it. It's been a long season, and almost everyone who ended their season here today is happy it's over.
Yeah, Joumar, I had to deal with him because the way he crossed the line, crying in a sense. It was, you work so hard for it, and you feel you do everything right, and you come on race day, and it's not your day, and that must be killing as an athlete if you work so hard for it as well, and they do work so hard for it. This is their goal in a sense, at least for the cyclocross campaign. And yeah, as you said, I think it's right. It's the right thing to say as well, because it is a junior category. They are all in a sort of a learning curve. They still have to develop. They still have to learn. The experience is very little, especially on this level. So this is also part of a World Championships where they get that podium in a sense, where we can see them race for almost the very first time, because we saw them race in Tabor, but thank you UCI for not broadcasting any of those races. And then you see them, and you see how interesting the racing is as well. And it's just a shame that we cannot see that for the entirety of the season. You really have to be there to watch the races in a sense. So I think that little footage of Joumar crossing the line, his fingers trying to remove those tears, that is definitely that's a side that you look at and you be like, you really feel for him, and you hope that he get over it in a sense. But it's hard, because you expect one thing and you get the complete opposite in a sense. That's hard to deal with. That is something you don't expect. But that's also part of the World Championships.
Yeah, and you can, like I said, ask the question, did he peak too early? Was he at his best last week instead of this week? You can say the same for Petzo Rosla. For Petzo Rosla, I would say maybe as well that could be the case. You can say, hey, from Dendermonde until Hogerheide, he was really, really good, and now he's not. But it's just so difficult to get right. And look, we discussed this already in the women's under 23 section, so I'll leave it at that and just go over the top 10. Hera, Grigolini, Lejeune, Noval, Suarez. Toon Le Pan, Søren Brier-Joumar, your top six. Then Noel Gooyer in seventh, ahead of Patrick Petzo-Rosola, Raul Lopez Sainz in ninth, and Francesco Dell'Olio in 10th. Three Italians in the top 10. And I think, again, it just shows the Italian program is really going places. The new vision of Pontoni is paying off. The medals or nothing strategy for selection, I've been critical of it before. I still think it is not fully the right way to go. The Italians have the budget, they've said so they should have taken more riders here to develop them. But that much about that. The start line, the arch has been broken down. I see to my right that the finish has also gone away. The people who are here are coming from the beer tent. They are getting increasingly drunk. One person threw his lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever it was, down when I was at the other place. Still, here, Hulst, it was in World Championships with character. It had a good course. I've heard that they are bidding again for the 2031, 32, 33 cycle.
Yeah.
What I think of that doesn't really matter too much because we'll see it when we get there. That would really see, hey, we're going to a situation where there's just a few World Championships hosting in rotation cycles, which would be a bad sign, especially bad if we need to come back to the same Dutch, Belgian, North France triangle for the, I don't know how many times and how many years, but for my feeling, too many. I want to see other race organizers jump in there or have the ability to, but that's not it. For Hulst Issam, I think we saw a good event, a nice World Championships, a nice course. We can conclude that after 2 years without titles, the 2-year drought for the Belgians, their drought has ended with the title of Arenbox. They can reflect on a positive championships, but it was a Dutch party here. They swept the titles today. They won one yesterday. It's 5 world titles, including the mixed relay for them. We see Czech Republic go home with their first world title since 2014, and that's the countries that win here. So in a way, we return to normal. The championships are dominated by the Dutch and the Belgians. In the last 10 years, often, especially because of the women's side, it's been more the Dutch who dominate the medal table, but the Belgians, I think, like I said, can reflect on a positive. And after a few years where the medal table looked a bit different, order restored to Netherlands, Belgium, and then the rest of the world competing for the medals. But still, I'm not feeling pessimistic about that. I think there's plenty to take away for those other countries.
We should definitely look at it from a sort of an optimistic perspective. This was a great event. I think that they put on a great event. It was, in a sense, greatly brought to our screens as well. I think that for sure there are going to be some federations that will be disappointed, but I hope that it's not going to discourage them. There were definitely some points that should be points of encouragement as well. And you just hope that they will be picked up. And about the World Championships, I will just wait and see what will be selected, what will make it through, and we will hear those announcements. I think that for Hulst will be announced somewhere in the summer or so. That's what I heard, but I'm not sure about that. But
maybe.
Or they said
it depends a bit. It will be at one of the UCI congresses, right? Like it's always at the Congress at the World Championships, and then they'll hand it out. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I thought it was Montreal actually.
It could already be that they had them out there.
Yeah.
But that's very much possible, Issam. That it's already there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are things we'll
cross that bridge
discuss
when we get there.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's just round it up.
You can we'll make a podcast then with our takes. I mean, just the final thing here is we have a number of great support from our listeners, and some of them were here today, some of them quite surprising ones, insiders who come up to me and say that they listen to it, other just people here out there in the big crowd recognizing me, and every single one of them, your support has been very much appreciated. We will still continue on until the end of the cross winter before we start our off season and the road season. It's been a good run here from Hulst. Like I said at the beginning, we're experimenting with this video format, and we learn as we're going along the way. It's not been perfect. The audio has not been perfect either. I know there's been some background today. I know there's been some background yesterday for me. But yeah, we'll try it. Being at the races means sometimes you need to compromise a little bit, and if you have any feedback, please feel free to leave a comment on this episode on Spotify or on YouTube, and we'll take it forward going towards next year. I really appreciate every support and all of your time as well, Issam. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the listeners too who supported us and who support us. And yeah, season is not done, so there is still some races left. It's gonna be, I cannot say that there's going to be with less enthusiasm. We're still going to have that enthusiasm that we had right now. We're going to hold on to that and get ourselves through that season. But yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting overall and being there on site. It's been a pleasure to cover this season so far, and there is still some of those races left, but I really appreciate being up here as well.
Of course, and the preparation for Ostende starts tomorrow. I mean, I spoke, for instance, with French national coach François Tarieux, and he's like, yeah, we've started training in the sand more, and we'll continue doing that. All our training camps are in the sand, and hopefully that helps. Next year, things are getting really loud here, so that's a sign to end it. Thanks everyone for listening. See you guys very soon for more podcasts, maybe this week with one about the World Cup schedule. Catch you guys then. Goodbye.